session is getting started with SQL Server Data Tools and Azure DevOps with Oliver. So before we start, fifth stands for Fifth Industrial Revolution. We are the initiative by Cloud for You technologies, which help companies and other technologies to openly share their learnings and get opportunities worldwide, each other, as well as through our partners who are associated with us. This is a glimpse of how we are growing. Till now, we have conducted around our 1113 sessions. 382 speakers are with us. 8,754 certificates has been assigned till yet, and around 28,128 members are with us. This is some of our master mentors. We are also an Alibaba Cloud Academy partner, so this is just a glimpse. So how we help in building the knowledge, digital presence, and helping you in odd hours when you need jobs, or conducting many sessions with the enhancing technologies and getting you closer to the data communities. So once our session starts, we will go through Oliver's presentations, and then how you can get your certificates. At the end, you will get a secret code will be shared with you on your email IDs. Okay, the certification link and the secret code, you can just put your secret code there and you can claim your certificates. This is the certificate which you will be getting at the end of the session. Now let's talk about Oliver. Oliver is a team lead on data warehousing and reporting, top Fortune 500. He has a good knowledge on SQL developer, Hadoop, R programming, application framework, big data, and many more. So not wasting much of your time, I would like to hand over to Oliver to you. You can just proceed with your sessions now.
Yeah, okay, I will first share my screen. This one. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're joining from, of course. Welcome to my session about getting started with SQL Server Data Tools and Azure DevOps. Before I start the session, of course, thanks for having me. My name is Olivier van Steemland. I'm a BI team lead working for X2O. X2O is a retail organization located in Belgium with more than 50 stores in Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. At X2O, I'm mainly known as the person who makes the BI development planning and the person who is optimizing the BI development and deployment flow. In my spare time, I'm a core member for DataMinds. DataMinds is the Belgian data user group focusing on the Microsoft data platform. Besides that, I do a bit of speaking and blogging as well, mainly about topics where I am running into on a day-to-day basis. So it's really about my personal experience with certain topics. In case you have any questions about the topic that I'm touching today, anything SQL, data, or BI related questions, please feel free to reach out. You can contact me via my personal blog, via email, via Twitter, via LinkedIn if you would like to. Just reach out. I'm more than eager to assist where possible. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey that I've been experiencing in the past couple of years. So first, I will set the scene and explain where I was 5 or 6 years ago, then how we were able to transition as a development team to work in a more flexible way. Then, the main part of this session will go about how to get started with SQL Server Data Tools and Azure DevOps. So it really will be a 101 session today. Then, near the end of the presentation, I will already provide you some insights on how you can move forward as well. And then, to finalize today's presentation, I will give you an overview of benefits and at least one challenge where you will be running into. Cool. So, a couple of years ago, I was working in a rather small development team. Let's say 3 to 5 developers, and at that point in time, we were having two environments at our disposal, a development environment and a production environment. And as a matter of process, we were keeping track of all changes manually, meaning every object we touched, every logic we changed, every parameter or configuration that was added or adjusted was kept track of manually. Where? Well, on the development tickets, in a Word file, in an Excel file. We tried email as well. Let's say that wasn't the best solution. Can get quite messy quite fast. Then, as a matter of tools, we were mainly using SQL Server Management Studio back then, which of course is a very convenient way of working. But at that point in time, we were having a couple of challenges as well, which we really would like to overcome. One of these challenges, for example, was moving big projects to production. What typically happened was, well, as soon as we received the go to move something to production, then we first need to find out which development tickets were involved, if we documented anything in a Word file, in an Excel file, perhaps in an email. And only at that point, we could start preparation for deployment. So we start preparation, creating our migration scripts, upgrade scripts, and so on. Then execute deployment. And don't be mistaken, these steps, preparation and deployment, already took us quite some time. An hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, maybe a day, maybe more, really depending on the size of the project and the changes, of course. Then, as soon as deployment was done, we executed test launches. Unfortunately, after these kind of test launches, we were required to start bug fixing straight away. Why? Well, we were still missing objects, missing configuration, missing parameters, and so on. So, as you can hear, preparation, deployment really was a hassle back then. In an ideal situation, what you actually would like to do is being able to prepare and deploy, let's say, in a matter of minutes, then firing up test launches, and as soon as your test launches are done, you want to go out with your team and start celebrating your victory of moving that one project to production. In my case, it would definitely be with a decent glass of Belgian beer. Of course, unfortunately, at that point in time, we weren't able to. The second example is priority changes. This is something I was really struggling with, especially in the beginning, first couple of years. But then let's take a look at this one from a business point of view. So let's say we're a beer manufacturing company, and we currently a rather small one, and we only have one production line where we currently are brewing the Lafite triple bottled. And the development team is making changes to the production line, and they're already making changes for 2 weeks. And at that point in time, management runs into the office and explains that customer demand is rising for draft beer. Well, at that point in time, we need to disappoint management since we didn't have any way to go back to the beginning before we start to make the changes. And we still require 2 more weeks to finalize the changes. So from a business point of view, we were really losing precious time. And we, of course, couldn't keep up with customer demands in the end. A third example, unwanted changes in production. A couple of years ago, when I was working in that small development team, we were allowed to come into the office in the morning and take a look at quick wins. And let's say a quick win is some development of 30-ish minutes, preferably less, of course. And we were allowed to develop these in the morning, then executing validation by ourselves by noon. And in the afternoon or evening, we were already deploying these kind of changes to our production environment. Now, what typically happened was, well, we were deploying way too much at once. So instead of pushing the changes for the draft beer to our production environment, we were already pushing our brand new beer into our production environment, which of course is a shame. The product wasn't developed properly yet. It didn't finalize development in the end. We didn't execute any tests on the development. So we were only delivering a mediocre product to our end users, which of course is not the ideal situation in the end. Then the final use case I would like to share with you is code went missing. So a couple of years ago, in that same development team, we were required to use a certain, well, let's call it bug fixing strategy, which we call production first. Meaning, to minimize day-to-day business impact, we were required to execute our bug fixes in production first, before moving the code back to the development environment. So I think you can already guess what happens. Well, we were forgetting to copy our code back, so during a future deployment, we were actually overriding our own bug fixes and we were delivering empty bottles of beer without the liquid gold inside. So we were really overriding our already built-up knowledge, which of course is a shame. Now, if we need to summarize what goes wrong, well, first of all, as a development team, we are failing because of human mistake. Well, why? We didn't document properly, we didn't prepare our migration or upgrade scripts properly, we didn't copy our code back to the development environment, and so on. Then, and I know I didn't really mention it, but we were failing on team communication as well. Why? Well, if we were properly communicating within our own small development team, then we could have overcome these kind of issues and the people could at least be taking a look if a bug fix was made before pushing the changes to production. Unfortunately, of course, at that point in time, we didn't. And then, where we're here for today, code management. If there was a proper code management system in place, then we could have overcome, let's say, 80 or 90% of these issues. So now it really is time to take a look at the future. So, what are we going to do? Well, first of all, I would suggest that you get a third environment in place, which we will be calling the acceptance environment. Now, the big question, where are we going to use the environment for? Well, first of all, we want to test our deployments before we deploy to production. So, for deployment testing. And then the second reason, which is the most important one for me, for example, is we actually want to get business involved in an earlier stage than production to give them some kind of feeling of ownership as well about the changes that they're asking. So they really should be testing our changes in the acceptance environment. Of course, if budget allows you to have an acceptance environment, for example. Then, as a matter of process, we are going to introduce automatic change tracking. Well, to get it automatic, well, we will require to use a certain set of tools, of course. The first tool that we will be introducing is Git. Git is a file-based comparison system. Then, we're going to introduce Azure DevOps as well. And for today, we will be focusing on the repository side of Azure DevOps. And this actually will be the location where we are going to save our source code for our databases. Then this is rather a big shift. We're going to introduce Visual Studio as main tool for development. If you want to, you can use Azure Data Studio as well. But for today, I will be only showing you how to execute development in this certain way with Visual Studio. Then the big question, what about Management Studio? Well, you can still use SQL Server Management Studio, but it will be more from a validation point of view. Or of course, you can still, if you really want, you can still use it to prepare your queries, for example. Now, if we take a closer look to database projects, then it first is important to know what a database project is. Well, or what it does. A database project allows us to execute more project-oriented database development. If we take a look at the left-hand side of the screen, right there, we can see a screenshot of SQL Server Management Studio with an example database, with the familiar folder structure of tables, views, store procedure functions, and so on. Now, if we take a look at the right-hand side of the screen, we can see a screenshot of an example database project, where we can, well, see more or less the same folder structure as in Management Studio. The important or the key takeaway right here is that the folder structure in your database project will be your own responsibility. You can go wild, you can go crazy, you can do whatever you want. Just make sure that your folder structure is clear for your development team and for yourself, of course. What is important to mention about database projects as well? Well, first of all, a really important one, don't ever use database names in scripts. Never. The reason why, a couple of years ago, when I was working in that small development team, I was working for a company who really enjoyed to have the environment name in the database name. So database name underscore development, database name underscore acceptance, database name underscore pre-production, and you know what? For a production environment, just leave it behind. If you're using hard-coded database names in your scripts, you won't be able to deploy from environment to environment. So it really is important, if you really require to point to a certain database in your scripts, in a database project, that you use something that is called SQL command variables. You don't need to remind the term for me for today, just know there is a way to get it done. Then there's something to tell about indexes as well. You can actually do two different things with indexes. You can say, well, I want to include them in my database project to make sure that all my source code is at one place, or you can say, I don't want to. Both options are perfectly fine. Just know, in case you want to, this will increase your deployment time in the end. The reason why is, if you, for example, change the data type of a certain column in a table, it will first drop all indexes, recreate the table, and then recreate all indexes. So your deployment time will be impacted. Then, last thing I want to mention about database projects are publishing profiles. A publishing profile is an XML file which you can be using to store deployment properties. For example, do you always want to deploy database properties? Or what do you want to do if there might be data loss? Might be a pretty important one as well. Or last one, what do you want to do with indexes which are available in your database project or in your target database, which are not available in your database project? Might become really important if you choose to exclude your indexes from your database projects. Now, we are going to introduce Azure DevOps as well. So, as I already said, Azure DevOps consists of 5 default services. For today, we will be only focusing on Azure DevOps repos, which will be the service that we're going to use to save our source code. Just know, in case you want to take a look at database deployment automation, then it might be interesting to take a look at Azure DevOps pipelines. And if you don't have a development ticketing system yet, then it can be worth to take a look at Azure DevOps ports. Just know. If we now take a closer look to Azure DevOps repos and for today the Git way of working, then it is important to know that Git is a distributed version control system, meaning, well, every single developer will be working on a local version of the repository. This is really important to understand in the end. Then, when working with Git, you will hear a lot about branching as well. Branching actually is nothing more or nothing less than creating a copy of existing code. That's a branch, basically. Then, the most important commands when working with Git are, first of all, pull to get all the code changes from your remote to your local machine. Then push, or actually commit and push to get your change that you have been making committed to your local repository and then push to the remote, which will be pretty important to make sure that your colleagues can continue working on your work if you, for example, are absent the day after. And then merging. Merging actually is nothing more or nothing less than combining 2 branches back to one. That's merging. Today, I am going to introduce you to branching per feature, or feature branching. Some people like to call it trunk-based development as well, but yeah, what's in it? The key takeaways here are, well, we will always have a main branch, which is often called the master branch as well. The term master branch mainly comes from the more traditional development teams, for example, Java development, .NET development, but since a couple of years, the term main branch is often used as well. So the main branch or master branch should always include the production version of your code. Always, no exceptions made here. Then we will be having a development branch as well. And this branch should always contain your development version of the code. Then you see something in between both branches as well, which we will be calling a feature branch. What is a feature branch? Well, for every single development task we want to execute, we are going to create something which is called a feature branch. As you can see, we are going to create a feature branch based on the main branch. The reason why we're doing this is to make sure that we can keep flexible for business needs and business requirements as well. So if, for example, feature A, we first started to develop feature A and all of a sudden there is something more urgent, well, if we just create our new branch based on the main branch, so from our production version of the code, our second feature can go to production way faster than our first one. So just that as a side note. So we have our feature branch. We're going to execute our development on the feature branch. As soon as our development is done, we're going to commit and push the code to the remote to make sure that our colleagues can continue working if we are ill or absent or whatever. And then we're going to execute a merge from the feature branch to the development branch to make sure that we can deploy our code to our development environment. As soon as that is done, we can start validating our development environment. If something goes wrong for some reason, make sure, and this is really important, to execute your bug fix on your feature branch. This is really important. So as soon as you make your bug fix, you will execute a merge once more to your development branch, deploy to your developed environment. And if you then pass validation, you are good to go to move it to production. So then you can just merge your feature branch into your main branch and deploy to production. Now, some challenges concerning source control. The first one is merge conflicts. And if you are as patient as I am, especially on the SQL project file, just something you need to know, or a useful tip actually, is to avoid merge conflicts on the SQL project file, make sure to hit the Save All button in Visual Studio before committing and pushing your changes to the remote. This might already help quite some. Then it needs to become a habit to pull in your changes before you execute a merge. So for example, if we want to get our code from our feature branch to our development branch, then we first check out the development branch, pull in all changes for the development branch before we execute the merge from our feature branch to our development branch. Don't worry, I will be showing you this during the demo later on as well. Then there's something to tell about branch maintenance as well. If we are going to execute a manual merge to development and afterwards to production, well, then there will be some branch maintenance involved as well. So for example, if you're developing 100 features a year, this will say, or this means that if you're using manual merges, you will need to remove 100 branches as well in the end. I will show you a way how you can avoid this one as well. Then the last thing, or the last challenge, and to be fair, the biggest of them all, is people. This really sounds silly, but everybody needs to be working in the same way or source control won't work. It really is as easy as that. Now, I know I've been talking quite some time, a lot theoretically, so I'm going to do what I like the most, which is getting practical. So if everything is fine, you should still be able to see my screen. And as you can see, I've opened up Visual Studio and I've created my very first solution, which is my multi-cloud for you solution. And in that solution, I already created my very first database project, AdventureWorks Health. We will be using this one later on in the demo. The first thing I want to show you actually is to create a brand new database project, which we will be basing on an existing database. So if I go to the left-hand side of the screen, there we go. I've opened up the SQL Server Object Explorer. There we go. And I've connected to my local instance of SQL Server 2019. Now, what are we going to do? As a first demo, I would like to show you how we can easily import the AdventureWorks data warehouse database. And then afterwards, we are going to use the AdventureWorks LT database as well for the second part of it. So first things first, what are we going to do? Well, we're just going to right click on the AdventureWorks data warehouse database, and we're going to say create new project. There we go. Now, what do we need to do? Well, the create new project window is opening up, and we first need to explain or type in the name for our project. So in my case, it will be AdventureWorks data warehouse. And then we need to tell where to save this project. It's my data file. So presenting multi-cloud. There we go. That's the folder I want to save it to. Then we can take a look at the import settings. To be fair, I won't be bothering too much about the import settings for today. The only one I really want to point out is this one, the folder structure. If you really enjoy the folder structure as in SQL Server Management Studio, then I would advise you to use the object type folder structure. This is the most familiar to what you have in Management Studio. It isn't completely the same, but it's the most familiar at least. So for today, I will be going with the object type folder structure, and then I'm just going to hit start. At this point in time, Visual Studio will first create a brand new database project, and then it's going to import all existing objects in the database project. While Visual Studio is doing all the hard work, I want to show you something else. So I just opened up Visual Studio, it doesn't really matter which project, and it is important to know that before you can start to work with SQL Server data tools, you will need to get a certain tool or plugin installed. So what are we going to do? We're going to navigate to the top, to Tools, and Get Tools and Features. This will be opening up the Visual Studio installer. So hopefully, there we go. So this might take a while to load, but there we go. As soon as it is loaded, we can go to the right-hand side, search for data storage and processing, and we can find out if SQL Server Data Tools is enabled. If so, you're good to go. If not, well, just scroll down to other toolsets, to data storage and processing, mark it, and install it. And then you're good to go as well. Cool. In the meantime, Visual Studio should have completed the hard work. There we go. So if we take a closer look, there we go. We can see, well, finished importing database, and it even created a log file for me with some details. Well, to be fair, I've never taken a look at the log file before. As long as it is working, it's working. So now we can just easily hit finish, and let's do a quick validation. So I'm going to open the data warehouse views, and in my database project, I'm just going to do the same. And let's take, so we have 5 views in our existing database, and we have 5 in our database project. So it seems to be quite okay. So that's one way. So this is the most easy way, the most convenient way as well, but it really can be as easy as this. Now, I want to show you an alternative way as well. So let's go to the left-hand side of the screen, and I'm quickly going to open up everything I require. There we go. So now I've opened up my AdventureWorks LT database, and let's say that this OLTP system, so the ERP system, is owned by a third-party vendor. And this is a use case I ran into a couple of years ago, and that's one of the reasons I really want to show this one. Let's say this database is owned by a third-party vendor, and we're not allowed to make any changes. Although we made an agreement with a third-party vendor where we were allowed to create and maintain certain objects of the database. For example, for today, I will be using the sales LT view per category. Let's say this is a view that we're allowed to maintain, which is in our ownership. So this is a view that we're using to execute our ETL work, to get it to the data warehouse, for example. And this is the only view we're allowed to maintain. So to get this into a database project, the first thing we're going to do is to take a look at the right-hand side. I'm going to my AdventureWorks LT project, right-click, go to Add, and say New Folder. Now I will be creating my folder structure myself. Luckily, then it's quite easy to get the view included in my database project as well. The only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop the view into the folder. And if everything goes fine, there we go. We have included our view into our database project. Now, if we take a closer look, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, we are running in a couple of issues, which of course is not really something we want. So if we take a closer look to what kind of issues we're running into, it's right here, there we go. So where are we running into? Well, the view has an unresolved reference to schema, an unresolved reference to object, unresolved reference to object. Oh, well, I think you get the point. So what is happening right here is, well, since we're not including all dependent objects in our database project, the database project is going to complain. So we need to find a way to get, well, first of all, rid of these errors, since as long as we have errors in the database project, we won't be able to build and deploy in the end. So this will be a multi-step process. So first things first, what I'm going to do is, well, I am going to the right-hand side of the screen. I'm going to right-click on my view, and I'm going to Properties. This should be opening the Properties pane. There we go. And we're going to take a look at the build action first. So this is the build action. And by default, every single file in the database project is set to build action build. This means that this file is going to be included in the default build and deployment flows. Now, to avoid these kind of errors, we're going to say, well, you know what? Ignore the file for now. So we're going to use build action none. This might seem a bit strange, but we'll get there in the end. So we're just going to say, well, build action none. There we go. And as you can see, time to celebrate. We have no more issues. That's step one. Be aware, since we have set the build action to none, we aren't able to get it in the default build and deployment process. So now it's time to tackle that issue. What are we going to do? Well, I'm going to introduce you to a new kind of file. So if you take a look at the right-hand side of the screen, right-click on AdventureWorks LT, go to Add, New Item. And now we are going to search for post. I'm going to introduce you to a new type of file, which is a post deployment script. So I'm just giving it a name. There we go. And as soon as it's loaded, I will be explaining what the file does. So what does a post deployment script do? Well, this file includes SQL statements that will be appended to the build script. Just lost the key. There we go. Please keep the appended word in mind. This is really important for today. And then just saying, well, you can use this kind of syntax to include a file. So let's give it a try. So R double point, views, view for the category of SQL. There we go. Now we are good to go. This should do the trick. See, there we go. Well, I have been asking to keep the appended word here into mind. The reason why, what the post deployment script is doing is during the build and deployment process, it will generate a change script if your file is assigned with the build action. If it's assigned with none, it doesn't, unless you're adding your file to the post deployment script. But what is the post deployment script doing? As soon as the change script has been generated, it will just include all the text in the referenced files at the bottom of the change script. So let's take a look at the view again. There we go. So what is this view saying? Well, it's always saying create view, meaning if this is just a brand new view that we have just created, then it will be fine during the first deployment, but afterwards it will be failing since the view already exists in the target database. So we need to assist Visual Studio and SQL Server Data Tools a bit. So we can say create or alter view. There we go. Or what you can do as well is drop view if exists. There we go. But if you use this, you will need to add a go as well. Both ways are perfectly fine. So there we go. Now, well, I think it's time to get our very first version of our database projects to Azure DevOps. So I'm going to open up my browser. There we go. And going back over here. Yep. As you can see, I'm signed in into Azure DevOps. And I've created a brand new project, multi-cloud for you. Now I'm just going to, on the left-hand side, I'm going to choose repos. And right here, I already have my repo. If I want to, I can create another one using the new repository, but I already have a blank repository, so I will be using this one. The only thing I'm going to do right here is copying the URL back to Visual Studio. So copy, going back to Visual Studio. There we go. And now for the persons who are paying attention to small details, if you take a look at the right-hand bottom, top bottom corner, sorry, you can see Visual Studio was already pointing out, you know what, it might be interesting to add your code to source control. So let's follow the advice. So add to source control kit. And now what I did is, well, I just went to existing remote. Then Visual Studio data tools already said, well, this probably will be the local path to the repository. And this is where I just pasted the URL from Azure DevOps into. To be fair, in Visual Studio 2022, this gets a lot easier. You will just get a separate tab to connect to Azure DevOps. And now I just say create and push. Yes, I want to save. What Git is doing in the background right now, it's first initializing a local Git repository, and then it's creating a link between the local repository and the remote repository in Azure DevOps. As soon as that link is set up, it's going to push all my changes to the remote. And if we take a look at the right bottom corner again, we can see we are currently connected to the multi-cloud for you repository, and we're looking at the master branch. If we want to quickly validate, we can go to Azure DevOps. There we go. I'm just going to hit refresh. And there we go. As you can see, I have all my work available in Azure DevOps. And the last change was, well, just now. So this really is a point where you can be proud of the work that you have been doing. You have been creating your database project. You have configured it to work with Azure DevOps. And this is the time that all your co-workers can start to benefit from the hard work that you have been doing. Now it is time to show you how to execute development as well. So first things first, we are going to create a development branch. So I'm just going to navigate to the master right here. I'm going to say new branch. Well, I want to create a branch called development based on master. Yeah, create. That's one thing. So now I have my development version of the code as well. And now I'm going back to Visual Studio. There we go. We're going to navigate to the right bottom corner, click the master, and we're going to say new branch. Since, well, we are using feature branching, so we will be creating a feature branch right now. So branch name, what I typically do is say, well, I start with the kind of branch I'm creating. So feature / ticket number. If you, for example, are working on a bug fix, then I would go with bug fix. Well, properly typed, of course. So bug fix. But for today, let's just create a brand new feature. And then we can say where to base it on. There are two different possibilities at this point. And we can say local master, which will create a new branch based on the local master branch on your local machine. Or to be safe and sound, we can go to remote and say origin master. This will make sure that we will get the most recent version from our production version of the code from the remote repository to our local machine, and then creating the data warehouse one feature branch from it. And we're going to say create. There we go. Now we are good to go. As you can see in the right bottom corner, we are connected to our feature data warehouse one. Now let's execute some development. So I've already prepared something. So if I just scroll down and I'm just going here, I'm going to unmark or uncomment this. So what did I do? I just executed the hardest development in the last couple of weeks. I added the product category description 2 for today. And I save. Now, if we take a look at the right bottom corner once again, we can see that Visual Studio or Data Tools or Git has identified one change. This is the ultimate change tracking where I was talking about. If you now click the pencil with the one change, we will get to the Git changes pane in Visual Studio. So what can we see? Well, it has identified one change in view product category.sql. So we are going to stage the change to say, well, I want to commit this to my repository and possibly push it to the remote as well. But before we do, we need to enter a commit message. Please make sure that this message is always meaningful. So if you're just getting started, what I typically do is I always start with my ticket number. And then if you're just getting started, start with the word because. We really want to point out why we did something. So if you're just new to it, start with the word because and then the reason. In my case, well, I just added a column for demo purposes to show how easy it can be to work with database projects and Azure DevOps. That's the reason why I added the column. And now I'm just going to say, well, commit staged and pushed. What this is doing, well, it's first going to commit our change on a local machine in the local repository. And as soon as that is done successfully, it's going to push the change away to the remote in Azure DevOps as well. As soon as this is done, and should be right now, there we go, we can actually quickly validate going to Azure DevOps, and I'm going to hit refresh. Something is going wrong. Well, as you can see, last change 5 minutes ago. I must be doing something wrong. Well, I did this one on purpose. As you can see right here, I'm going to zoom in. There we go. I'm currently looking at the development branch. This really seems to be silly, but I've lost some time a couple of times because of this. I was looking at the wrong branch. So if I just switch over to my feature branch, then I will be able to see, well, last change just now. So my change is successfully committed to Azure DevOps. Now, it is time to get our change to our development environment as well. So let's go back to Visual Studio. There we go. And we're going to navigate back to the right bottom corner. So the right bottom corner where our feature data warehouse 1 branch is. Well, we didn't have the development branch locally yet, but we had it on the remote, right? So let's go to remote, and a new issue occurs. I was expecting the development branch right here. Well, there's a very logical reason why we don't have it yet. During the slides, I was mentioning 3 important Git commands. Well, actually there are 4. I left one out on purpose, which is, if we just go right here, which is the fetch command. This command will get branch-based changes in. So if new branches are created or removed by colleagues, these kind of changes will get to your local machine by using the fetch command. So if we just say fetch, this might take a while. So initializing fetch at this point in time should be there. So we navigate back to the right bottom corner, click on the feature branch. We still didn't check it out locally, but we go to remote, and now we have our development branch available. So now we can just check out the development branch. And as soon as that is done, there we go. You can see that my change isn't here yet. So at this point in time, my change is still commented in the development environment. So let's change that. So we're going to navigate once more. Sorry, the right bottom corner in Visual Studio is my favorite one. It's something that I'm using all the time. I'm just going to click on the development branch. I'm going to navigate to my feature branch, going to right click and say merge into current branch. Now Visual Studio is going to point out, well, are you sure you want to merge into development? I will, but please keep attention to this comment of mine. So yes, And as you can see, we have now successfully merged our feature branch into our development branch. So now, as you can see at the right bottom corner again, one change has been identified as well as an unpushed commit. This is actually just a thing that is going to show everybody else on the remote repository that we have executed a merge to the development environment. So we're just going to say push to make sure that everybody gets the most recent version from the remote repository as well. As soon as that is done, it is time to execute deployment. So it has been pushed successfully. So we're going back to the Solution Explorer. Now, to publish, we are going to right-click on our database project, go to Publish, this one, yep. And now Visual Studio is first going to execute the build phase, so the build process. If we take a closer look right here, so what is the build process? The build process is just going to execute some validation if you have any errors in your project, any kind of issues actually. And in the end, it will generate 3 different files: a model XML file, a DLL file, and the most important one, the DECPAC file. This is one that will be used to deploy your changes to production. Now, if you are wondering what's included in the DECPAC file, well, it's fairly easy to find out. You can just replace the .decpac extension with .zip, extract all, and take a look what's inside. Can be fun for once. As soon as the build process has finished successfully, well, we get the published database window. So here we just need to identify our target database. So in my case, my AdventureWorks LT database for today. Okay. Then I'm going to the advanced section. And right here, we can configure quite some things as well. So for today, since I'm deploying to a third-party vendor system, I actually don't want to deploy database properties. So I will be unmarking this one. Then the next one is block incremental deployment if data loss might occur. This is something I'm leaving marked by default. This saved my life a couple of times. If you, for example, need to remove a column from a database, then you will need to unmark this one, otherwise your deployment will fail. It's pretty important to know as well. But for today, I'm just going to leave it marked. Then I'm going to the drop section of the advanced publish settings. And right here, there are 4 options which are worth mentioning as well and are pretty important actually, especially the last one. If you decide to exclude your indexes from your database projects, then please make sure that you unmark the last one. If you don't, all your existing indexes in your target database will be dropped. I have been in that situation and I forgot about it. So I can tell you, these really are fun days at work, especially in the afternoon, by creating every single index yourself once more. So make sure to unmark these. There we go. And now we can just click OK. And before I execute deployment, this also is the time where you can create a publishing profile. If we just say save profile as, there we go. We can just provide it with a name. In my case, AdventureWorks LT_dev or development. There we go. And before I publish, I'm just quickly going to show you what's included in the publishing profile. So if I right click on my publishing profile and open it up, well, what's included? Well, just close this one down. There we go. Well, we're going to deploy to this database. What do you want to do? Do you want to block if there might be data loss? Do you want to drop indexes which are not available in your database projects? These are the things that are getting saved in your publishing profile. The biggest benefit of a publishing profile is, well, when I just double click my publishing profile, it's going to execute the build process, and then it will open up the published database window with all pre-configured values loaded into the published database window. So this is really useful. And now we can just say publish. And to be fair, now we really need to play the waiting game. So this might take a couple of seconds Worst case, to be fair, can take a couple of minutes actually. And there we go. So if we take a look, we were able to create the publishing preview. We created a database script. We executed the deployment, and it was done successfully. All that in a matter of 13 seconds. This has been a game changer for me in the past, compared to the past actually. This is really saving a lot of time for me, since we were able to prepare and deploy in a matter of minutes instead of hours. And you're probably thinking, well, yeah, okay, we've just seen one tiny change and it took us 13 seconds. Yeah, fair. To be fair, I'm working with database projects and Azure DevOps in production environments, which are a lot bigger than what I'm showing you today. And my deployments for one database take 1 or 2 minutes at maximum. So this really is still saving a lot of time. So we have successfully executed development. Everything is available in our development environment. There are a couple more things I would like to show. So first things first, something really useful in Visual Studio. If I right click on my productivity review, there we go. And we go to Git, View History. I'm opening up a screen or a window which is showing me who changed the file, when the file was changed, why the file was changed, and if I'm going to the right, where the changes at that point in time. I'm using this all the time, especially since I'm doing a lot of validation work. But one of the benefits is, well, if I just select both commits, right click and say compare, I can even see what has been changed. So by using this window, I can actually very easily find out what has been changed, why, by whom. And if I don't understand the change properly, I can just contact the person who made the change and have a chat about it. This is a really powerful feature. And of course, a very clear changelog as well. Now, one more thing in Azure DevOps. Let's say we have executed our validation on our development environment, and it is time to get our changes into the production environment. Well, to avoid branch maintenance, we are going to use something else than a manual merge. We are going to use a pull request. So if we take a look at the left-hand side of the screen, under repos, we have pull requests. And I can just say, well, create new pull request. It gives a title, a description, and then I can say, well, actually, this development should be revised by this person. Okay, and more importantly, and this is really important, I've made the mistake once, make sure to select the right branch as well. This is really important. So from my feature branch to the master branch right now, to get my change to production. And now I'm just going to say create. So I'm creating my pull requests. So what is it doing? It's first checking, are there any kind of merge conflicts? At this point in time, we don't have any, luckily, of course. If we now go to files, we can exactly see what has been changed. So now I am the reviewer as well. So I'm going to revise the development that has been done. So a change has been made to the productivity review. What has been changed? Well, apparently Olivier has made the change or uncommented this productivity description to field. Okay, seems to be logical. You know what? I'm going to approve the change, and then I'm going to complete the pull request. And this is the point where I want to be. What I want to show you is, well, the merge type, don't bother too much for today. If you want to keep your commit stream in your production branch or main branch or master branch a bit clean, just use the squash commit merge type, but don't bother about this one too much today. What I wanted to show you is this one. To avoid branch maintenance in the end, if you're using pull requests, it will handle the branch maintenance for you. So if we just leave this all as this, I would just say complete merge, then this is going to do all the work for it. So it's executing the merge first. As soon as this is done, there we go. The merge has completed successfully. That's one. And if we now go to branches, and to make sure that I really show you everything, I'm going to all branches. as you can see, I don't have my feature branch in Azure DevOps anymore. So the branch maintenance has completed as well. Now, this is everything I want to show you during the demo. Let's head back over to the presentation. There we go. Okay, there it is. So moving forward, today I have been showing you how to set up a database project in two different ways. One with a full database, and one time if you only want to have a subsection of a database in a database project. Then I've shown you briefly how to connect your local repository or your database project to Azure DevOps as well. We have been talking about branching, and for today I've been showing you how to work with feature branching or branching features, which actually is the method I'm using at work as well, since this is the most convenient way of working for me. Of course, if you have other ideas about branching, please feel free to use them. The most important is that you're choosing a branching strategy which is the most convenient for you. Then, at the end of the demo, I showed you how to use pull requests as well. I know it was very briefly and very short, but I really hope you see the additional benefits of working with pull requests. So you are actually introducing peer reviewing and you're avoiding branch maintenance as well. Now, what would the next steps be? Well, there are actually two where I can think about, and they're not in a particular order, to be fair. One is test automation, and if you're interested in test automation, it might be interesting to take a look at T-SQL-T, which is a T-SQL unit testing framework. And on the other hand, deployment automation. So with deployment automation, for example, what I'm doing with it, a couple of months ago, I was required to maintain 6 different environments. So I was, let's say if I would do all deployments manually, it would take me 5 minutes for each environment, so 30 minutes in total. If I used deployment automation, then it was just, well, for my development environment, as soon as the change came in on the development branch, I automatically just let the system deploy the change to the development environment. So I don't lose any time to deploy to the development environment. For my deployments to production, well, I actually did it in a less automated way. My build process was automated and my deployment process was slightly automated. I just need to create a release in Azure DevOps and let it go. That was everything I need to do to deploy. So this can be a time saver as well. Now, benefits and challenges. So about the benefits, I really hope I was able to show you today how easy it can be to set up a database project. And of course, in that database project, that you will finally have a clear change log as well. Then I really hope I was able to show you that the efficiency of deploying will be improving a lot as well. Then, if you're using pull requests, this really will be improving your development quality as well. Of course, today in the demo, I was a one-man team, but if you're in a small team or even a larger team, then using pull requests, make sure that everybody's work or development needs to be revised by other persons as well, which will lead to higher development quality in the end. Then, something I mentioned before as well, the biggest challenge you will be running into is changing habits. So you will really need to change the way you are working. So people will be your biggest challenge. That being said, my name is Olivier van Steeland. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have learned something new during the session today. In case you have any feedback, I have a feedback form of my own, oliviervias.be/feedback. In case you want to have the slides, you can find them on GitHub as well. And in case you want to go through the material again, which we have been covering today, I've written out a full blog post series about, well, getting started with data tools or database projects and Azure DevOps. And I have a full guide as well, how to automate your deployment process. So if you're interested, just visit my personal blog and you'll find all required information there. Thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Oliver. It was really a wonderful session. So participants, you have a chance to unmute yourself and ask if any question you have. Okay, so if we don't have any question, then we can move closing this session. It was a wonderful session. You will get your certificates. You will receive the secret code as well as the certificate link in your email IDs. So thank you, Oliver, on behalf of Multi-Cloud for You Technologies. And thank you, participants, for your time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you. Bye-bye.